What up, mixed martial arts maniacs, jujitsu junkies, and other alliterations that I may or may not come up with later? We're coming at you live from around 5 o'clock somewhere here in Katy, Texas, and Bernie, Texas on Thursday, May 27th. Here with my partner, Gage the Gentleman Hamby. I'm Zach the Zamboni Stopper Gleason, and we're kind of just trying something new. There's no Bellator this week, no UFC, a little one FC tomorrow that we could flip on, but it's a little bit out of our range of knowledge. But what's up? We're just gonna kick it back and forth, talk about last weekend, talk about the upcoming stuff, some MMA news, and keep it real.
We're vibing.
Yeah, we're big vibing. Coming at you live in my mom's pink bathrobe. Shout out mom in the next room. I love you, mom. Not say anything back.
That's funny, man. All right, man. Well, let's get into it. Let's talk about where we hit and where we missed last week.
Well, let's start with Friday. I think that's a little bit easier to talk about. Fabian Edwards versus Austin Vanderford. What are your initial thoughts?
All right. That was a tough one on the scorecards. I'm a proponent of whoever does the most damage. I think they should get the round, especially, bottom's obviously not a key position that you want to have, but Fabian Edwards just dismantled Austin Vanderford's face in the last round. And there was 30-27s? Unanimous.
Yeah, they gave all 10-9s to Vanderford.
And he stuffed plenty of takedowns. That's, obviously that's not enough to win the fight, stuffing takedowns. But, he did the most damage in the fight by far. In that interview with Big John McCarthy, Vanderford was just fucking spewing blood like a fucking geyser.
No, you and I were talking the whole fight. And what was it, the third round where he split him open? Because you could hear it.
Big elbows. I'm like, that could have very easily been a doctor's stoppage if it wasn't so late in the fight.
No, absolutely. I mean, you could hear the shot, and I very much so thought that was Vanderford hitting Fabian Edwards. But you were like, no, look, he's the one bleeding. And when they showed it in slow motion, that upward elbow from the bottom was absolutely nasty.
Yeah, sometimes you just take a dive on the refs or the judges' scorecards, man. That's what happened. I don't think it was a terrible misrepresentation of judging, but I obviously don't think he won that. If that was a real fight, there's not many more elbows that he could have taken from the bottom like that.
So let me pick your brain on something. It sounds pretty obvious that when it comes to scoring, you favor damage over like a takedown, but like throughout the fight, like you said, Fabian Edwards stuffed a bunch of takedowns, and even on some of the ones that he did actually get taken down on, he got up really quickly and showed really good wrestling defense from the ground. So I'm curious how you think that should have scored out. Not by round, but you think Fabian Edwards probably scored at least one or two more points than he did, right?
Yeah, I think for me personally, takedowns do score in my book, and sure, there have been plenty of fights where the guy that takes down his opponent and holds position, that should, obviously count for, points to win the round. But when you're not doing any damage on top, you're just laying on them and keeping them there, you're fighting. Like, come on. The main goal is to win via stoppage. And if you're not hitting your opponent, you're just merely laying on top of them, then what are you doing? That's wrestling. Obviously, Austin Vanderford is a great wrestler. There's no doubt about that. Very, very good, and executed his game plan well. But how much damage did he do to Fabian Edwards? I don't even think Fabian Edwards, had a bruise or cut on his face.
No, I was about to say I would not be surprised if we didn't see Fabian Edwards turn around and fight again very soon after that. But I agree kind of with what you said for sure, because I remember at one point, I couldn't tell you what round, but Big John and the other commentators were talking about, the ref might make them, give up this position. They might stand him up. Yeah.
I don't think Austin Vanderford was doing enough working. Now, on the flip side, you have people like Derek Brunson in his last couple of fights takes his opponent down. Kevin Holland, I mean, he didn't necessarily do a lot of damage, but he did enough to, in my mind, I was like, all right, he won that. He controlled the fight.
Well, I think Brunson, kind of the point you're getting at is that, like, he was always looking for offensive moves from the top position. He was always looking to inflict damage, and he was always looking to advance the position. And, like, Derek Brunson's not a submission guy, but he's absolutely somebody that could, if he could have worked a full mount, very easily could have ground and pounded that fight out.
Oh, yeah. I mean, look, Khabib, one of the greatest fighters that we've ever seen. His game was predicated around takedowns and, hurting his opponent. And he got a lot of stoppages from his ground and pound. Austin Vanderford, on the other hand, didn't do anything really offensively that I saw. I was like, oh, okay, that's definitive. He just kind of held position. And I think that's really lame.
No, I'll bring this up not next week, but the week after on the big June 12th card. But I've been watching a bunch of the reruns and stuff and getting ready for that one so we can make a little money. But that was the December 19th card that I'm going to talk about, was the one where Figueiredo was sick. He was in horrible condition. He was in the hospital the night before the fight, didn't get any sleep. But Figueiredo, when he's healthy, is one of those guys who's very apt in jiu-jitsu and can advance to a submission, but he'll use the ground and pound for a smaller guy. But in that first fight against Moreno, the whole thing I'm driving at is that since he was in such bad shape, he was trying to fight him on the feet, and then when he got tired, he'd take him down and lay him prey. I mean, that's one of, many reasons, including the point loss and all the stuff that came in that fight, but, they drew. He very easily could have won the fight if he would have had the stamina to do more work on the ground, because he got to the ground very effectively.
I agree. And like going back to the fight that we were initially talking about, I saw plenty of positions that Austin Vanderford was in that were dominant positions, but he just, obviously props to Fabian Edwards, but he just didn't do anything with it. There's plenty of situations where he had, had his legs tied up, he couldn't move, and then, didn't pound on him. So.
No, for sure. I can definitely touch on the fact that, Fabian Edwards wanted an American wrestler, and he got one, a very good one, and the guy gave him everything he could handle. But, there's not a whole bunch more you can work on from Fabian Edwards' perspective. He did damage from the bottom. He got up really well. He used the cage to his advantage from a defensive perspective. Excuse me. But, wrestling's all about your hips. He's got to keep his hips back, not let Vanderford get to his hips, maybe prevent some of those takedowns, and we see a little bit different fight, because Edwards definitely looked better on the feet. He definitely did damage when they would stand up and trade.
Yeah, he also had holes where Austin Vanderford would shoot, and he needs to recognize those better so he doesn't get taken down, although he did have very good takedown defense in the first couple rounds, I believe. First one for sure. But
yeah, the first round he was definitely caught off guard.
All right, let's move on to the second fight of that card. We didn't really talk about many fights on that card, but
Chris Cyborg.
Yes, dominant. Got the finish in round 5 late. What else can you say? Probably one of the top women in the world besides Amanda Nunes at this point.
No, 100%. And I think we're kind of seeing age take its toll on Chris Cyborg, not necessarily in a bad way, because when you're so technically sound and you're as good as Chris Cyborg is, you grind out 5-round decisions. You prove that, I say it all the time, goats do goat shit. But you can definitely see she's losing a little bit of that signature Chris Cyborg one-punch power.
She caught her good in round 5, but props to her opponent, Leslie Smith, I believe.
Yes, Leslie Smith is a tough bitch.
She took a beating.
Let me rephrase. She's a tough woman. She's a badass.
Yeah.
Props to Leslie Smith, because she didn't do a whole bunch more to improve her offensive game against Chris Cyborg. Like, there was never a point in that fight where I thought she may or may not have been winning, but from a defensive perspective, she fought Chris Cyborg about as well as anybody. And she's no Amanda Nunes or fucking Holly Holm or any of them. No offense, but that was a very good improvement from the first time they fought to now.
I want to get your take on this. There's I know not many people might know her, but Clarissa Shields. I'm not sure if you're familiar with her. She's the champion, female boxer, and she's making the switch over to MMA, and she is a big lady. She's 5'10", listed at 165. I'm sure she can get down to 145.
Yeah, she's gonna fight at 145 in PFL.
Yeah. What are your takes? Do you think if she has kind of like, she's obviously a great striker, if she can translate from boxing to MMA, you think the UFC or Bellator might want to make something happen to get her over there, compete against Cyborg or Nunes?
Absolutely. I think she's a big name, especially because she's an Olympic gold medalist. She's one of those people that makes mixed martial arts very interesting, because it's like, do you think somebody with a predominantly striking background, a very good boxer, can beat somebody with a predominantly grappling/wrestling background? Kind of what makes the sport what it is. But, I've seen Clarissa Shields is training with John Jones and Holly Holm. She's down in New Mexico. And I believe this news was announced pretty early in the fall, maybe August or September. This is not old news, but the point I'm driving at is that she's taken the time to really train. She didn't rush into, I signed a contract, let me get a fight, let me just do this, go out there and get my ass whipped and learn on the fly. She said, I'm going to really take this seriously. I really want to prove that I can do this. And, I have all the faith in the world in her, especially, given what I just said, the training partners and the team she's working with. I think they'll have her ready.
I think it's going to be very interesting to see how she does in mixed martial arts and how it forwards her career in this particular sport. Now, not switching gears, but
she's got to beat Kayla Harrison first. She's got to be PFL champ before she switches organizations, to answer your first question.
That goes without saying. I mean, we're all talking about what ifs here. But on another note, coming from mixed martial arts to single martial art, do you know who Gordon Ryan is?
No, not off the top of my head. Tell me about Gordon Ryan.
Gordon Ryan, he's according to Joe Rogan, probably the best jiu-jitsu player the world has ever seen, apparently.
Really?
I've seen some of his stuff, and he's awesome. You should go watch his podcast with Joe Rogan a few weeks ago. But interestingly enough, he had a staph infection, and it messed up his stomach with the antibiotics or something. And this guy hasn't been able to eat. And he's taken some time away from the sport, which is interesting. Not many people would go out of their way to watch jiu-jitsu or whatever, but he was talking about making the switch over to mixed martial arts, so it's kind of sad to see that he has to take time away because he has an injury like that. Because I was kind of looking forward to him, competing in mixed martial arts, because he's such like a dominant jiu-jitsu. Like I don't think anybody's really ever beat him. Crazy story he's telling on Joe Rogan's podcast about how he gave the announcers an envelope and said, "Don't open this till after the fight."
Oh God.
And inside of it, he drew a triangle, and that's how he won the fight. So he's a character, definitely taking a look.
Wicked. That's a great story.
Yeah. But you want to hit some misses last week in the UFC now? Back to our wheelhouse.
Sure. No, you definitely kind of segued me into the UFC, talking about Gordon Ryan having to take time off, because you and I were both pretty confident about the main event last week. And after watching Cody Garbrandt and seeing that performance, it's very clear that there's something wrong there still. Maybe it's not mental the way that Cody wants to say it is, but after the bout that he had with COVID this past year, I'm very curious. He said he did a lot of cardio. He was riding the bike and stuff after COVID, but I'm very curious to know how long he was actually back to training mixed martial arts before he fought this fight. Because I can't imagine that he had trained for more than 6 or 8 weeks after what he looked like out there.
You bring up an interesting point. You said maybe it's physical. From what I saw in the main event last week was he didn't look like he was 100% in. He didn't look like he was putting his life on the line per se. I'm not saying that he didn't try or he didn't put as much effort forward as possible as he could. But what I am saying is he kind of looked timid. He just he wasn't sure of himself if he could eat those shots. Now, obviously, once he got in round 4 and 5, he took Font's best shots. He kind of came alive, in my opinion. Still lost, but you could see the confidence building after he started eating those shots.
No, for sure. Yeah, I think it was weird. I think the media and the narrative surrounding this fight kind of got to him because everybody was saying, Cody can't go in there and get into a firefight and just stand in the pocket and trade, or he's going to get his head punched off again. So I definitely think he looked a little bit timid. But I mean, all the credit in the world to Rob Font, not to discredit Cody, but there were times where he'd get his back to the cage and it was very clear he was trying to pull that Ascensao punch where he would grab the power from somewhere in the mat and just slam it. But Rob Font definitely was patient. He picked his shots. When Cody was loading up for the big ones, he said, I'm winning this fight. I need to fight smart. I have no intentions of going in there with you and playing this on your terms. So all the credit in the world to Rob Font. And that jab looked like a fucking rocket.
Yeah, no, I'm going to piggyback right off that. Font looked phenomenal. I think he's one of the next in line for a title shot. Obviously, with the division backed up, like we always say, because Jermaine Sterling, I don't want to talk about him too much. Not my favorite character in the UFC.
Yeah, I was about to say, I'd hate to give him any sort of time on here, but.
Yeah. Anywho, back to Font. Yeah, he stuck to his game plan. Whatever his game plan was, keep distance, use your jab, work behind that. I mean, phenomenal job on his part. It was, in my opinion, it's mostly a boxing match, really, when it comes down to, and he outboxed probably one of the best boxers, or was one of the best boxers in the division. There's not much more to say that he just dominated that fight.
No, looking back at what I said about a physical perspective, last week on the podcast I had mentioned, Rob Font's a pretty good boxer. Cody might be well off to use his wrestling. And Cody did come out and use his wrestling early. He took him down a couple of times in that first round. But like we kind of talked about, Cody didn't do very much offensively from that position. There was a point where they were about to be stood up as well. And part of the shitty part about wrestling, especially in MMA, is you saw him exert a lot of energy in that first couple of rounds, the way Cody usually does. But because it was in a different style and he wasn't, throwing the same amount of output in terms of strikes, people considered it to be a little bit more lackluster. But, it was a different game plan. Rob Font looked a lot better defensively on the ground, I think, than a lot of people expected, including Uriah Faber and Cody's team. So,
yeah,
credit to the New England cartel for getting him ready for this one. That was
I mean, he executed perfectly on the takedowns. It became apparent, after the first round when Cody attempted a takedown, he was successful in the first round. After he, botched a couple and didn't get a successful takedown, I think he just, kind of quit on that aspect of the game. I don't know if he thought he was necessarily doing the right thing or what. He just didn't look like he was 100% into it, And it goes back to the physical thing with the cardio, He looked like he was gassed out after those takedowns.
No, it's definitely going to be interesting to see what we do with Cody next because he's still a major player at 125. However,
you mean 135?
No, he just fought. They fought at 135. He was also, talking about double belting, and he was supposed to fight Figueiredo for the belt before Moreno, but he had COVID.
Really? I did not know. Has he ever fought at 125?
Yeah. Him and Dillashaw was at 125 on their Ultimate Fighter season, I think, right?
Oh, okay. Because I thought that was for the bantamweight championship when they fought.
They might have done one at both.
I don't think so. I think it was both at 135. But
regardless, Cody's still a player at 125, but I think this performance and I think not seeing the best Cody Garbrandt may or may not affect that. So I think it's interesting. I think Cody versus Marlon Moraes makes a lot of sense after they both lost to Rob Font. I think Cody versus maybe Dominic Cruz. Cody versus Sugar Sean would be, that sounds like a move right now for a main event too, especially because Sugar Sean fights in July on the McGregor card. Seems to match up pretty well. Throw those two together in like October or November, you got yourself a main event. You got yourself a big card.
I agree. Maybe Cody versus Cheeto Vera. People
Cody
forget
versus
about
Tito
Cheeto.
Vera, yeah.
But I mean, it'll be interesting to see how he changes. Maybe he builds up some more confidence. We wish the best for all fighters, but we're just kind of looking at what went wrong from a former world champion to where he's now on a 4 out of 5 skid.
Yeah, 3 out of 4, I think. But
yeah.
I think one of the biggest things that Cody has on his side is A, he's got some of the best trainers and best coaches in the world, and B, he's probably not still in his athletic prime the same way he was when he was robot dancing on Dominic Cruz, but he's still in his 20s. He's not even 30 yet. He's still got a lot of time in this sport, a lot of time to improve. And I think he's got a very one-track mind, and he wants to get that belt back and prove he can be the champion of the world. But he's not a young guy. He's a veteran to the sport, but he's still got to hold his horses a little bit.
Yeah.
Pay attention to the task in front of you. Don't get too far ahead of yourself.
People fight into their late 30s all the time in this sport. So, but he's in his athletic prime right now, but that doesn't mean that coincides with your mixed martial arts prime, as seen by plenty of champions winning in their later 30s.
I mean, what, Jan's 38? All the champs are in their 30s right now, except for Rose. Jan? Do you know that? Jan Blachowicz.
Okay. Jan Blachowicz, 38?
Yeah, and Glover Teixeira's 42. They're going to do battle in September, probably one of, if not the oldest championship fight in history.
Well, Stipe versus DC was old too. But.
Yeah, the third one, the trilogy was bad. DC was in his 40s for sure. He might have been 40 even.
Yeah. I mean, it just goes to show you that, mixed martial arts is a very crazy sport when people in their late 30s are, dominating.
For sure.
At a sport where that takes like a lot of athleticism, like some of the greatest athletes in the world.
Yeah. No, let's move on. I got the grudge match from the co-main event. The one that we disagreed on last week. You got my ass 2 weeks in a row. I'm going to have to let you rub it in my face. But, man, Carla Esparza looked good.
I told you, bro. And she dominated that fight. And once again, her game plan went exactly how she wanted it to go. She knew what she was better at. She had no business getting in a stand-up war with that chick. Janan, I believe is her name.
Yeah.
But she took her down, and I'm pretty sure she's faced wrestlers before in her career and was able to stuff their takedowns. Now, Esparza is a whole different animal. She ragdolls women all the time, and that's kind of been her, go-to to win fights, beating even the champion, Rose Namajunas, in the Ultimate Fighter, I believe. So, not surprising on my end, but I saw it coming, What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I knew Carla was a great wrestler. That's something we've seen out of her since her first days in the UFC, since the beginning of her career. Yan Xiaonan kind of walked into that first takedown in the first round, and sadly for her, it only took Carla one takedown in the first round because Xiaonan couldn't get up. I think what surprised me a little bit and what kind of caught me off guard was, I knew Carla would probably have some takedowns, and I expected that fight to go to decision because Carla would have some ground control time. But I expected Xiaonan to be able to create some offense and be able to do a little bit more off her back to get up.
Mm-hmm.
I also definitely did not expect Carla to come out and look, for lack of a better term, she just looked angry. She looked pissed off. She inflicted more damage in that fight than I think I've ever seen from her, from the top position. She was out there to end that bitch. And, if she could have done anything to make a statement for herself to get that next belt shot, that was it.
Yeah, I mean, I think the word you were looking for was malicious, because that was malicious, man. She came in there and she ground and pounded her through the floor for the entire fight up until the stoppage. And, it was not pretty. Like, she tore apart her face. And,
No,
more power to her. It sent a message. She was sitting at number 4, right? Number
no,
3
it was 3 and 4. You're right.
three.
You're right.
That was a 3v4 matchup. Obviously there's 2 other contenders up there that ranked above her, but with that, absolute dominant showing and history against the champion Rose, where she beat her. She set herself up perfectly to get a title shot, and I wouldn't want to be mad. Especially with Wei Lee and I believe Joanna sitting at the top. Carla Esparza really showed what she's about.
No, Zhang Wei Li, I'll just bring it up now. We were going to talk about it later, but she had made the excuse that part of her lackluster performance in Florida was because of the crowd, because of the boos, because the people hated her. Yeah, I'm with you. Me, you, and Benil Darush are on the same page because we all think that's about the dumbest excuse you could make. But Zhang Wei Li came out and said she wants a rematch with Rose, obviously, but she wants it to be in a neutral location. She wants to do Fight Island or something like that, which, I mean, whatever. But at this point, after Carla's performance and after how, lackluster again, Zhang Wei Li looked against Rose, I'm not going to say the word bad. Championship fight, you can't say the word bad. But
it was also in the first round within the first few minutes, and she got caught. It's not a diss on her as a fighter, but she also got knocked out. I think, before we go into this, I just have to say this.
Say it.
Why can't we get Joanna versus Wei Lee too? That was such a banger of a first fight.
Say.
Like, come on, like that. People would love that. I don't think anybody would ever do them.
That's exactly what I was going to say, especially because of the history that Carla and Rose have. I feel like after Rose and Zhang Wei Li fought, no animosity. They were like, leave it in the cage, blah, 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 whatever. But I just think that, like you said, Wei Li versus Joanna is a much more interesting fight and would probably be much more entertaining for us to watch a second time than Zhang Wei Li versus Rose a second time.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I agree with you 100% on that. I mean, I don't think you can fight.
Carla adds an interesting matchup element to fighting against Rose. I think if there's a style that could do it, I'm never going to pick against Thug Rose. That's just not my style. But I think Carla definitely has a better chance of beating her than I thought Zhang Wei Li had.
I probably agree with you. I don't know. Those top 3 women, Rose, Wei Lee, and Joanna, all just stand-up killers. They're all,
There's a bunch of players. We talk of not mad shit, but we don't always talk the most highly, of women's mixed martial arts. But another 115er that I really like, Mackenzie Dern.
Yeah, she's great too.
I mean, Marina Rodriguez is in that division. There's plenty of girls. I mean, that 115 women's strawweight is deep.
Yeah, that's probably the most exciting division in my perspective, because 125, you got Shevchenko locking it down. There's nobody really threat to her. 135, 145, you have Amanda Nunes literally destroying a whole division. We're into extinction pretty much. So,
and Valentina could destroy the entire 135 division besides Amanda.
That's what I'm saying. I mean, 115 is the best, in my opinion. But I was reading this ESPN article yesterday, I believe, and they're like 10 things that can make mixed martial arts even better. And they were saying like just ignorant stuff about like whoever wrote this doesn't watch sport. But one thing I did agree with was maybe some more weight divisions. I know Joe Rogan's been a big advocate of this. But like maybe 105 division for women, atom weight. I think that would be interesting.
I think 105 would be cool, but I think at some point we probably have to do away with 145.
I think so too.
I'd like to see a lot of the bigger girls get down to 135 and make that women's quote unquote heavyweight.
Yeah, I also don't think all right, when women are obviously a lot smaller than men on average. Of course, there's
On average, for sure.
big
There's
exceptions,
cases.
all this other jazz. But I have to say, most the average women, I'd say probably 70% of the women population is probably anywhere from 105 at the bottom, 135. 145 is getting up there, but most how athletic is a chick at 145? Obviously Amanda's a great athlete. We have other ones, but there's just not enough talent out there in my eyes. There's a few, but that's it.
That's what I was going to say is I don't think it really has to do with a physiological or a scientific reason other than the fact that 145 is not a very deep division, and now you've lost Chris Cyborgs over in Bellator, so we're not going to see Cyborg versus Amanda, especially because Cyborg and Dana White hate each other. We're done with the Miesha Tate era, the Ronda Rouseys of the world. They're all gone, and
Miesha Tate's coming back.
Miesha Tate is coming back. You're absolutely right. And so is Holly Holm was supposed to, but she got hurt. She's not done yet. But to say the least, if we were going to keep 145 around, we'd have to do like a cross promotional thing, like Clarissa Shields, Kayla Harrison, Chris Cyborg, Nunes, Miesha Tate, like throw them all just in one big Grand Prix. And
I like that idea, but also the issue is that's 4 names, right? At 145 in the women's division. That's it. There's nobody really, besides Kayla Harrison and Clarissa Shields. That's probably the most interesting 145 fight we're going to have in a while, honestly. But after that, there's little competition at that weight division.
Which is actually an interesting point that kind of leads us down the card because, Felicia Spencer was usually a name that you could throw in at 145 and say she's pretty damn good. She's tough. She doesn't get knocked out. She fights full fights. I'll give her the benefit of the doubt. But Norma Dumont kind of made her look silly on Saturday.
Yeah, I was pretty confused about that one. Go ahead. Go ahead on your take.
The striking there was top level. Like I said, I thought she kind of made her look silly because, like I've mentioned in the past, part of having a wrestling offense is not necessarily being the best wrestler, but it's inflicting the fear of being taken down into your opponent. If they're worried about being taken down, they're not blocking their head and blocking the body kicks and playing as well defensively, which opens some gaps for you. But Norma Dumont did not look even the slightest bit afraid of Felicia Spencer. There were a couple of times I thought Spencer tried to get to her, and Dumont didn't necessarily do a lot of sprawling and getting back, but when Felicia Spencer tried to close the gap, she gets stuck with a left or right or a knee or something like that. That was like, oh, I don't want to do that again.
Yeah. Obviously I picked Spencer. I was rooting for her, but Dumont came out, did her thing, got the dub, man. She executed her game plan. And I saw something where she came out and said she has no intentions of fighting Amanda. And that's what happens. When you're one of the scariest.
Good on her, yeah.
Name one time, there are very few times in the men's divisions where a man's ever said, nah, I'm good. I don't want to fight him. I'm scared. It just doesn't happen.
Well, I think men are a lot more,
testosterone. Yeah, we know. We know. We don't have to explain it.
No. The way I was going for is I think the management teams and the people on the UFC side are a little bit more clever about how they disguise, I'm scared of you, I don't want to fight you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I'm not saying it doesn't happen because it happens all the time, but it's like, oh, that guy's not ranked. Well, you don't want to fight a not ranked guy because he's probably going to beat you, right? It makes sense.
Thinking about it a little harder now, there's one guy, really, it's Islam Makhachev, who always seems to make an appearance on this show for whatever reason, but he's been getting dodged, really, honestly. And I don't blame him because he's a very good fighter. He's also lower ranked than a lot of the guys in the top 10. So for one reason or another, they've been dodging him. But other than that, then nobody has ever come out and said, yeah, I'm scared of him. I'm not going to fight him.
It's another guy who always makes an appearance, except for last week. I made sure to note it
No,
because
don't you dare. Don't you dare.
I'm doing it. Chimaev got dodged all last summer. The only guy that wanted to fight him was Neil Magny, and the only way they got Leon Edwards to sign to fight him was by leveraging Leon and saying we're going to take away your ranking if you don't. Like they offered everybody under the sun Hazmat Chimaev, and nobody wanted any piece of that cake.
Yeah, interesting. Um, let's move along. What else did I know? I think what did we go last week?
Okay, so another one that we botched, that we biffed on. I owe an apology to Jared Bandera because I said he wasn't very good, but man, he put on a showcase against Tafa.
That was awesome kickboxing by him, and he looked competent, more than competent in that
No,
cage.
he definitely understood range. He was the longer guy by far, and I think you saw towards the end of the fight, Tafa tried to pour it on and try to win that fight late, but Bandera did enough to just keep him away from him and significantly alter the game plan of Tafa throughout the fight.
Obviously, I think for us, why we didn't pick him is there was very little information out there about him. I couldn't really find any footage on him, so it's really hard to pick when you can't find actual footage, in my opinion. And we've seen Justin Tafa knock out people before. It's not a knock on him, Bandera, but he came out, looked great, man. Like, looked really clean. Like, for a big man, looked coordinated, didn't gas out, really, in my opinion. He just touch him and go, touch him and go.
No,
Tafa,
for sure. And
Tafa knew he was getting, beat, and late, he just started throwing Hail Marys, trying to hit him. And another props to Bandera, I'm pretty sure he took one right on the temple and just, obviously it hurt, but he didn't let it down him.
No, for sure. And we called this card kind of a downer and made fun of it last week, but there's just something about mixed martial arts, man. You and I were both big NFL, college football guys, and I'm not a football guy anymore, but mixed martial arts is the best sport in the world because even on a down business night for the UFC, that was an awesome night of competition. Every single fight was competitive.
Obviously, you have the champions and then you have contenders and whatnot, but there's always something that people don't see coming. Obviously, you have your Nunez's of the world that pretty much you can always bet on them winning. But other than that, man, it's really just a throw of the dice. Honestly, you don't know what the hell's going to happen, how people are going to react. 1 inch is all it takes, in or out, and get clipped and fight over, man. I think just the sheer competition of the entire sport makes it great.
For sure. And blah, 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 blah. Excuse me. No, there's definitely a lot that goes into like watching the sport and preparing to make picks, like you talked about in terms of looking at footage and watching stuff. But like I said, that's one of the things that makes this the best sport on earth because another football saying, they say any given Sunday, any given Saturday in the UFC, anybody could come out and win. Like nobody had Norma Dumont beating Felicia Spencer. Yan Xiaonan was the favorite in her fight. Justin Tafa was a pretty sizable favorite. Last Saturday was the night of the underdogs.
Yeah, it was.
Except for the bottom of the main event. One of the ones that we hit on pretty significantly, Jack Hermansson versus Edmund Shabazzi. What was your initial reaction to that fight?
I was surprised at how well Shabazzi looked, even though he lost. Right? I think he showed what the hype was all about pre-Brunson fight, which is deservingly so. And he caught Hermansson a few times, and I was like, okay, it's not looking good for our bet. But Hermansson, the wily veteran, came in there, and, inked out a win, in my opinion. It was pretty close. Yet, obviously, again, we'll come back to this wrestling. He got him down on the ground, did some damage, kind of had top control for the fight, and kind of what we basically said was going to happen. But I do like how Edmund Shabazzi looked on the feed.
Edmund Shabazzi is a world-class kickboxer. There is no question about it, no doubt about it. And like you said, he showed it. That first round, he dominated Hermansson. I was very nervous for a bet as well. But kind of like we talked about last week, Hermansson got to the wrestling, and in the second round, he got him on the ground. And kind of the lay and pray thing, he got him on the ground. He had top control. I think in the second round, Hermansson was more so looking for a submission. He wanted to stop the fight. But what a third round. What an end to that fight. I remember texting you and going, man, even if they gave 10-9 to Shabazzian for the first and second round, Hermansson 10-8 the third round with the ground and pound. He absolutely showed how to play offense from the top position.
Yeah, he was dominant in that last round, to say the least. Yeah, I'm sighing because I like Edmund Shabazzi. I think he has a lot of talent. I just think he needs to keep on working on his ground game, and if he can get that shirt up, he has a real shot. And he's also very young. I think he's like, what, 24?
23 or 24, yeah.
Yeah, he's a young guy, and, he spots some big names in the middleweight division, and, look good in some of them. Brunson, not so good. At the end of this fight, not so good. But he has time to work, and I think if he really, focuses in on his grappling and his wrestling, jiu-jitsu, he can actually make a run to the top in a few years, maybe.
No, for sure. And I think one of the big things you can hit at with a guy like Shabazzian is even though he lost the Brunson fight pretty handily, there were moments where he looked really good. Even though he lost this Hermansson fight, there were moments where he looked really good. I think he just needs to work on putting it all together and becoming a more complete mixed martial artist and not such a singular dimension kickboxer. But like you said, I have a lot of high hopes for Edmund Shabazzian, and I propose a couple of things to Mick Maynard, Sean Shelby, Dana White, all the guys at the UFC. One, Shabazzian versus Kevin Holland at 185 sounds like the fight.
Yes.
Two, another thing I kind of wanted to pick your brain about, Luke Rockhold said he wants to come back. Former champ. How big of an opportunity would that be? Because, we look at it, we talk about it, we want to see Luke Rockhold get a big name, but there aren't a lot of big names at 185 that don't already have business to take care of. I'll elaborate on that a little bit in a minute, but how big of an opportunity would that be for him to get a, easy fight under his belt to say, I'm back, put me in the rankings, let me call for somebody in the top 5. And how big of an opportunity would that be for a guy like Shabazzian to fight a former world champ and say, hey, I'm on a 2-fight skid, but I just beat Luke fucking Rockhold, so I deserve to be in the top 10, top 5 fighting killers.
That's a very interesting point. Former champion, obviously. I don't think he's fought in a while.
It's got to, 2 or 3 years at least.
Yeah. It's interesting because I'd obviously like to see Kevin Holland versus Shabazzian, but that's kind of an eliminator for a contender picture, which I don't like because I think they both have potential.
I was about to say they definitely would play each other out.
Yeah.
One would stay, one would have to go.
However, that'd be a great fight. But back to the Rockhold thing, I think both those guys just need to stay as far away as possible from him, not because he's some killer. Obviously, he's a good fighter. But they've just both lost to 2 guys that just basically pounded them into the ground wrestling. Are they going to literally take a fight against a former world champion who did that at the highest level? I don't think they will. Maybe somebody else, somebody hungry in that top 15. I don't know who would, but seeing Luke Rockhold get back in there, you just hope he doesn't, Chris Weidman himself.
No, for sure. And I think that's interesting that you mentioned that because, that would have been the fight. Weidman versus Luke Rockhold would have been the fight, but obviously we're not going to see Weidman for a little while, if ever again. Hopefully he comes back. But, like I mentioned a second ago, it's interesting because you contrast 185 with 170 and see all the players that are at 170 who don't want to fight. And then you look at 185 and you have Izzy and Vettori, both booked, both business. Cannonier and Costa now, both booked, both business. I'm not really sure what's going on with Whitaker, but I can't imagine that we're going to throw Luke Rockhold straight into a number one contender fight. I just imagine that, unless Izzy decides to jump around weight classes again, if he beats Vettori, Whitaker is just on ice until that fight gets made.
I kind of want that to be the case. Obviously he's coming off a hard fight against Kevin Gastelum and looked insane.
That's the only player at 185 that could really be in Luke Rockhold's wheelhouse if he got up there as Gastelum, but continue.
He's still pretty high. Jerry Cannonier versus Costa is going to be interesting. They're both hard hitters.
Tilby Brunson, forgot to mention that one.
I think Brunson might be the best fight for Luke Rockhold, actually, now that you mentioned Brunson's name.
But they're booked. Till is fighting Derek Brunson.
That's right. There's some kind of round robin deal in my mind going on at 185 with all these fights coming up in the next couple months.
But look, they're all fighting.
Yeah, no, yeah, exactly.
And nobody's fighting.
Yeah, it's that title picture is probably the murkiest to me besides Whitaker, because I think he's
185.
Yeah, I think Whitaker's next to get his rematch against Izzy, but then after that, we're gonna see how Till handles Derek Brunson. I think Till, maybe if he looks good enough, he can get in there, get a fight against Izzy. I think that would be a banging fight.
Well, what's crazy is as much as we keep talking about Whitaker next, Whitaker praise, Izzy and Izzy's team don't really care for Robert Whitaker, and they gave him a bunch of shit about not wanting to turn around and fight in June after the Gastelum fight. But, it's an interesting thought. If Till looks good against Brunson, depending on when that fight takes place because of Till's collarbone, they were saying Till next before Vettori, when that was the fight, before Whitaker anyway. What if Darren Till leapfrogs him? Wouldn't that suck for Robert Whitaker?
I like Robert Whitaker as a person. I think he's, very, very good fighter, very respectful.
And he's
person.
Talented, yeah,
he's
for
very
sure.
Talented.
And he looked good against Kelvin, man. He looked real good in that fight against Gastelum.
Yeah, he did. He did very much so. I don't know, man. What are your thoughts on this?
I think it's interesting because Izzy is one of those guys that you have to acknowledge as one of the stars of the sport. He's not just a champion. He's exceeded that point. You got to put him up there in the Masvidal-McGregor level.
Absolutely.
Which is only interesting not because it's true or false. If y'all want to argue in the comments, I'm more than willing. But because Izzy's going to have a say in who he fights. Dana's not going to say, you get Robert Whitaker or no contract, and that's that. Yeah. Izzy's going to have a say in it. So, like you kind of mentioned, if Till looks strong against Brunson, even coming off an injury, I wouldn't even be surprised to see Till get the next title shot and have it be at the end of 2021.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. Now that I think about it more, Till's basically the only one that hasn't fought in this little tournament that they got going on.
And he hasn't fought Izzy yet before either.
No, that's what I'm saying. Till hasn't fought Izzy. But Izzy's pretty much decimated. Right? We got Gastelum, Anderson Silva when he was in the picture. Whitaker.
Costa, Whitaker.
Am I missing
anybody? Romero. That's interesting.
Oh, God. Don't even get me started on that shit show. That was awful.
No, I'm with you. He hasn't fought Cannonier yet, but we're talking about Cannonier just lost to Robert Whitaker. He's coming off of a broken arm.
He's old.
I don't know if he can beat Paulo Costa, but we'll talk about that a little bit closer to when they actually fight. Regardless, I think that's probably what we see happen is Vettori, then Till leapfrogs Whitaker. Whitaker gets pissed off, gets into some beef with Izzy, and then it comes down to who does Izzy hate more, Robert Whitaker or Paulo Costa? Because one of them's going to get a rematch.
And what people don't realize is Vettori has already fought Adesanya and lost. Obviously,
I mean, he was the closest to beating Izzy as anybody, except for maybe Kelvin Gastelum.
yeah, that was a while ago now. That was a few years ago. I'm not even sure if that was in the UFC because I don't think it was.
It was. Which one? Izzy versus Vettori?
Yeah.
Yeah, but it was a 3-rounder. I don't think it was a main event.
Yeah. I mean, Vettori's just built like a brick shithouse. Italian brick shithouse, that is, you know.
Le brick shit the house.
Yeah, you need a big shithouse.
Mamma mia, Marvin Vettori.
Hey, what? Angry Marvin?
Angry fucking Marvin, man.
Shit. Hey, play Marvin's room after that fight, son, if he wins, because that's how we're going to be feeling.
I was about to say, I think he thinks he has the game plan to beat Izzy, so I think he'll look better than we give him credit for. But I think part of the problem with Izzy against Blachowicz was that Blachowicz was so much bigger than Adesanya.
Mm-hmm.
185, we're talking physics. 185 is 185. You know what I mean? Marvin's not going to get to be 25, 30 pounds bigger than Izzy by fight night. I mean, maybe 10, but that's not enough to hold a guy down unless you're completely capable on the ground.
I think Israel really showed his true defensive skills when, I mean, I can't really say that he didn't get taken down at all in that light heavyweight fight, but he didn't get dominated on the ground, in my opinion. Right? Am I tripping?
No, I mean, he just couldn't get up. Like, and a lot of it, kind of like you're saying, he started off well. You know, he started off and looked all right, and Jan really took him to the ground and took advantage of the weight advantage and the wrestling advantage in the 4th and 5th round. The big thing for Izzy was that like you said, he wasn't bad off his back, but he couldn't get up. He couldn't get off the ground, and it was just because Jan was so much heavier than he was. I don't think
Jan was a lot bigger.
Advantage on the ground. But that's a conversation for 2 weeks from now. Anything else from last week we want to talk about? How about Butterball Barnett? That was a shit show, huh?
I give him credit. He had heart. He had heart, and he tried, man, but he didn't stand a chance against Big Ben Rothwell. That was, I can't believe that bastard got a UFC contract.
Listen to me right now. If I ever step in the octagon, look, let me stand up and show you a little bit of my own Butterball. If I ever step in the octagon and I decide to start training, I'm calling out Chris Barnett right now because I'm convinced I could beat that fat motherfucker. But that was just bad, man. He was trying to throw all sorts of spinning wheel kicks and dumb shit in the first round, and all that happened. He just got tired, yeah. And by the time Chris Barnett had him on the ground in the second round of that fight towards the end before he tapped him out, I mean, it almost looked like Butterball was praying to God to save him.
Who was the ref? Was it Herb Dean said, "Don't turn your back and run"?
Like, he kept saying, "Don't turn your back." Yeah.
Like what? Like he was literally running away, and that was using all of his energy.
I'm gonna fight Chris Barnett before I die. Even if it's Mike Tyson versus Roy Jones, I'm gonna fight Chris Barnett before I die.
I mean, he hit hard. He didn't. I mean, he has some skill. He obviously doesn't have the stamina or the fucking size at all to compete with anybody high level in that division. I mean,
there ain't nothing wrong with being short, but if you're short and slow, you're gonna get torn up. That's just the end of the story.
He was as wide as he was tall, man.
I just mean there was no attempt by him to get inside and break that distance effectively from Rothwell. It was just like, he's longer, So if I close my eyes and duck and swing and happen to get in the right combination of slip and land, maybe I'll knock him out. But it was all Hail Marys from Butterball since from the second they closed the cage.
Yeah, congrats to Rothwell though. He looked fantastic. Obviously against a subpar opponent, but he looked like
he took advantage of it and he got
he had
paid.
gas in the tank, man. He had gas in the tank. His striking looked well and finished on the ground. Rear naked choke, I believe.
Yeah. The other one I kind of wanted to touch on, Bruno Silva looks like he's the real deal. Did you see that one? The KO in the first round on the prelims?
Bruno Silva versus
Victor Rodriguez.
Yes, he hit him with that overhand right or left.
Yeah.
I don't really remember or say.
There was a knee to the face that stunned him, and then he
KO'd him. He was out.
Yeah, and then he held up the 75K sign. That was pretty cool.
75K Dana.
Yeah.
That was pretty good. He looked pretty solid. That was probably one of the more competitive fights up until that knockout, if I don't recall.
I mean, it was in the first couple of minutes. It was on the first round, pretty early. Bruno Silva got in and got out pretty quick.
I must be tripping then.
Now, he's a guy that's strung together a couple now. Like, I think he's becoming an interesting player. I think he's a name.
What division is this in?
I want to say 45, but my heart also tells me that he called out Cody Garbrandt after the loss, so maybe 35.
Was that in the prelims?
Yeah, it was the not the maybe it was the feature prelim.
No, it wasn't.
Butterball. It was the one before that.
Yeah.
Oh, he's at 25.
Okay, yeah.
That's
1 minute in. I don't know what I was talking about by that being competitive. I obviously don't know what the hell I was thinking about a different one. Anyway.
No, that one?
Yeah.
And then David Dvorak looked good, even though he got a last-minute replacement.
I told you his hands looked stellar. He's fast.
And he got the choke out, rear naked choke, easy.
Yeah.
He was the second biggest favorite on that card, minus 550. But thoughts and prayers to Paiva's family. He had to pull out of the fight last minute due to complications from the weight cut, which I think the UFC should implement a lot more often. When guys don't look healthy stepping onto the scale, we should not send them into a cage to fight in a sport where they could get severely injured. But thoughts and prayers, and I guess congrats to Dvorak for getting the job done.
Yeah, let me pick your mind on this. So we talked about one earlier, Singapore Asian promotion with plenty of American fighters. Shout out Super Sage Northcutt from KE, Texas.
Yep,
fights over
my
there.
high school.
Yeah. What do you think about their hydration testing when they have to do weight cuts?
I didn't even know that was a thing. What's that all about?
Basically, you have to keep a certain level of hydration in your body so you don't get dehydrated when you show up for the weigh-in. So people fight in their more natural weight class.
I appreciate that, actually. I think it makes a lot of sense. Because, like, this year we've already seen people pass out on the scale, in the UFC. Like, that's not healthy. It's not good for anybody to be trying to fight as small as they can, I think there's certain guys that can do it effectively. Like we saw Barbuzal cut down to 145 and do it and come out and say it didn't affect me. He looked good at 145. He's looked good at 145.
On the topic of weight, have you ever seen the picture of Alexander Volkanovski when he played rugby?
Holy shit, that dude was a tank.
Bruh, he fights at 145 now as the champion at 145 in the UFC. I think they said he's well above 200 when he played rugby, like a stacked house.
His first professional fight was at 185. Think about that. Holy shit.
No, I mean, obviously he's a great fighter, but 145, that's just ridiculous, man. I don't know how he made it. Like, that's what I think he was maybe 220. That's a whole, 80 pounds. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, no, that definitely took some work and effort.
Yeah.
I mean, speaking of Volkanovski, we got to talk about 145. There's a whole bunch of stuff going on at 45 right now, it seems. And starting off, the Ultimate Fighter launched on Tuesday. What do you think about that? That's good for business for the UFC, huh?
They took what 2 years off, 3 years maybe at this point. From
Yeah, I can't even remember who the last season was, but I want to say 2 years.
I know it was in 2018, but I'm glad they're coming back with it. There's obviously some changes that people want to see. Obviously they're not. They're just exhibition fights up until the last two fights for reasons that they don't get disclosed. You know who wins ahead of time, but
Yeah.
I think it'd be interesting to see if they get any good characters. There's obviously been 11 champions come through the Ultimate Fighter and 5 Hall of Famers, I believe.
Something like that, yeah.
So there's definitely good talent. Usman and Rose are the two right now that won the Ultimate Fighter, or from the Ultimate Fighter. I don't think either of them won, but are now champions.
I know Rose didn't win, but I'm not really sure about Usman. Because that was crazy. I mean, the Ultimate Fighter is groundbreaking. Like Esparza versus Rose was the first 115 fight, 115 championship fight, excuse me, ever, and it was the conclusion of the Ultimate Fighter. But I don't know, man. I hate to be critical, but when you could have had somebody like Colby and Usman as your host, or Colby and Masvidal, or Max and Volkanovski, even.
Yeah.
I don't know if Ortega and Volkanovski are the characters that are going to send this show through the roof.
I don't know.
Especially with it
You
streaming
never
on
know.
ESPN Plus.
I don't. Are the coaches locked in with them? I don't think they are.
I
But
don't know if they're locked in with them, but they have to train with them. Like this is their
they're
their
going to be
training
around
camp.
each other a lot. And if I know Alexander Volkanovski, he's going to be talking some shit to Brian Ortega. I think Ortega is going, he's going to talk shit back.
I think they're going to be pretty friendly, but I guess I don't know, man. I don't see it from them. I don't see the Conor McGregor, Uriah Faber, like, I'm going to fuck with you and try to piss you off. Or Chael Sonnen versus Vanderlei, Chael versus John. Like,
yeah,
there's been some good seasons, like, but, we'll see. You might make me eat these words, but let me throw this and spin this around on its head. Do you think this plays into an advantage/disadvantage for either one of them, considering their championship fight is at the conclusion of the Ultimate Fighter? Like, as a training perspective, do you think this throws one of them more so out of whack?
I don't think it throws one more out of the loop than the other. I think it might overall degrade the quality of the final fight. I think when you're around a person that long for 16 weeks, you're either going to develop a mean hatred for somebody or you're going to be friendly with them. Also, they're not going to be completely focused on their fight. They have other things they have to, they have obligations to the Ultimate Fighter. So it'll be interesting to see what the final product is.
Well, especially because they did the intros that, we know who's going to be on there now. They got a former rugby star like Volkanovski. They got a dude from Alaska. Seems like the characters are going to be more so in the house in terms of the contestants than the coaches. However, like you said, we've seen a lot of talent come out of this. We've seen a lot of champions, multiple Hall of Famers. So, we might be talking about the person who wins this show for the next 5, 10, however many years.
Yeah, it's also a possibility that nobody comes out of this season.
That's true.
There's other ways that it could be interesting, which would make a better show, like namely if there's one champion at the end that got to fight for the title. But we obviously know there's levels to this game, and nobody that comes from the Ultimate Fighter is going to be on the level of any of the champions.
No.
I think just more emphasis on the importance of it, like there being more on the line, would be interesting. I don't know how they would do that, but
no, and I'd definitely like to see them incorporate the finale,
on the
Griffin v. Bonner style, in terms of like put it on a pay-per-view, put it as like the feature prelim if you want on a big pay-per-view card. Like, throw it somewhere where people are going to want to watch it as more than just the Ultimate Fighter finale. You know what I mean?
Also, if it were put on ESPN, the finale, I don't know if they have a plan to do that or not. I haven't read anything about it, but I know most of it, if not all of it, is going to be on ESPN Plus.
Yeah.
So I think it would also help if it was on regular TV.
No, agreed, 100%. But, you know, we're going to have to see. We're just going to watch, and I'm sure it'll come up more often than not. But, you know, continuing at 145, we just saw Max versus Yair Rodriguez get announced for July 17th. What do you think about that? Where's your mind sit on that?
From my research, Max Holloway is a badass. I
Yeah,
don't think
Max
it took
Holloway's
much research to know that. But Yair Rodriguez, if I'm not mistaken, hasn't fought in almost 18 months. I think the
Well, he
last
got
time.
suspended. You know, USADA has trackers on everybody so they know where you are so they can come test you whenever they want. And he had like a 12-month suspension because USADA popped him for not having his location on or something like that.
Oh, that was Yair?
That was Yair, yeah.
I heard about that. Did not know that was this fighter. Yeah, so he hasn't fought since October of 19, if I'm not mistaken.
They were going to do Yair versus Zabit for a while until that happened.
Yeah, I mean, he fought Jeremy Stephens twice, won the last one. Jeremy Stephens is a very good fighter, very tough guy. But this comes into play a lot when people don't fight for a while. What is this ring rust going to look like, especially against Max Holloway, who just dismantled, in my opinion, a very, very good fighter in Calvin Kattar and took him to the back house, son.
I mean, we just talked about how good Rob Font looked. Rob Font, Calvin Kattar go together. I mean, they train together. That's just how it is. If Rob Font looked as good as he did against Cody Garbrandt, you can only infer based on just simple logic how good Calvin Kattar would look against any average opponent not named Max Holloway.
No, Max Holloway wins the fucking Matrix for that last fight, and I don't see it. I don't see his train stopping. And I do like how busy he's being, even though he knows he deserves another title shot against Volkanovski. And that's no joke. I have mad props for him for that.
No, I mean, we're talking about a guy who defended his belt 4 times in like a calendar year, with one of those fights being in December and not January. You know, 4 times in 365 days. And he's a guy like
one of the greatest featherweights of all time.
He likes to stay active. I'll give you that. But, like, especially if you look at the progression, when it was December, early January, before the Calvin Kattar fight, Volkanovski said, I beat this punk twice. I don't want to fight him again. I'm the champion. I can make that decision. After Calvin Kattar, he's saying, well, I don't know what else y'all are going to do with that kid, but might as well fight him again. So if he comes out and looks as awesome as he did against Yair Rodriguez, I think he just solidifies the fact that he needs to be in a championship fight after Ortega versus Volkanovski.
I couldn't agree with you more. And I think as good as bantamweight is and lightweight is, with those divisions being on fire with so much competitive fire, featherweight kind of is, you know, the odd man out, in my opinion. I mean,
featherweight gets forgotten about a lot. You're right.
I mean, obviously, you have a solid top 3. You got Max, you got Volkanovski, and Brian Ortega. But after that, I mean, there's no real superstars that you can really just come up with off the top of your head. That
there's some killers, though.
No, no doubt. But there's nobody that you say, I want to see Volkanovski fight, you know, not named, you know, Ortega or Holloway, right?
I mean, I love the Korean Zombie, but you're right. I don't really care to see Korean Zombie versus Ortega or versus Volkanovski, excuse me. You know, the guy that really, I think, got screwed here is our boy Barboozle, because he was talking about, you know, I'm 2-1. I barely lost to Dan Ige. Like, you know, I think I should be up there.
Oh, that's right. Dan Ige. I do like Dan Ige. I think he has.
We got to look him up real quick because Dan Ige's got a fight coming up. He's signed to do one on, I believe. Regardless,
he fought recently too and had a 1-punch knockout. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, that was back in March. March, something like that.
Also, Dan Igue's competition hasn't been necessarily Ortega or Holloway, you know.
No, he beat Gavin Tucker on the Bilal Muhammad Leon card.
Yeah.
Oh, Dan Ige signed on to fight the Zombie.
Oh, okay. Yeah, but
July
I mean,
19th. That looks like a midweek fight.
Really interesting.
The 17th is a Saturday and the 24th is a Saturday.
Huh. Interesting. We'll have to see how that goes. I think Dan Ige, if he wins, maybe gets mentioned more, but nobody's on the level of Holloway, in my opinion. He looked untouchable the last time we saw him, and I don't think anything's going to change. He's always looked good. I think
one of those guys is going to have to fight Barboozle, though.
I think it might be Ige.
Wait, excuse me real quick. Ige versus Korean Zombie is June 19th, not July 19th. So 3 weeks now.
Okay. I think that was going to be a good fight. But yeah, I mean, the featherweight division, it's also being held up. I'm glad Holloway is getting in there. Is he going to be the main event?
Yeah. Well, I mean, July's loaded now. Check this out. So we got the McGregor-Poirier card we've talked about on July 10th. Okay. Now Holloway versus Yair is headlining the next card, July 17th. And then the next one I want to toss you into, Dillashaw v. Sandhagen finally got rescheduled for July 24th. So 3 weeks in a row.
Oh, yeah, killers. I'm sure they're going to stack up these cards, and we might have an off week in August. But still, all those headlines should, I think, have your attention, really. They're all impactful.
Speaking of August, the rumor right now is they want to do Francis versus Derek August 7th, that first week of August. And you know what Dana said? We might come back to Houston, motherfucking Texas.
Oh, hell yeah. Derek Lewis in his hometown, that place is going to go bonanza.
Give me your opening thoughts there. What are your thoughts about how that fight may or may not play out?
All right, Francis came out, patient Francis last time, looked extremely well. First time these two fought, they both looked timid. Now, you get Derek Lewis in a firefight, I'm going to take Derek Lewis, but I think there's going to be a long line potentially in his hometown. He knows he can't have a rematch or a repeat of their first fight, and he's publicly said that. He even said that after the fight, that was a terrible fight. He knew it. So it's going to be interesting to see if they get some nerves and maybe push the pace fast. I could see it being a real short fight because neither one of them want a rematch or a repeat of the first fight.
Well, and love the guy to death. I'd love to have him on the show one day. So anybody knows Derek Lewis, give him our number. But, Derek's no spring chicken. So looking at this fight with Ngannou, how many more chances does Derek Lewis get to fight for a belt after that? I think that's going to be a huge factor that plays into that. Is Ngannou just that beast? But
I think he's been timing his title fight or title run. Obviously, he wants to be the best he can be. But like you said, he's coming down this home stretch of his career.
I don't know, man. This fight's really interesting because if Derek Lewis wins, he throws a wrench in everything that's going on at heavyweight in terms of Stipe versus Ngannou rematch, in terms of Ngannou versus Jones. Derek said he'd fight Jones. I'm assuming that would be the next thing to happen if he ends up winning the belt. Yeah. Because he's beaten Francis twice. There's no reason to put on the trilogy unless it's just super competitive and Derek wins by decision, which I just don't see happening in any way, shape, or fashion.
If you see either of them making it 5 rounds,
no.
I bet the house that does not go to the decision.
No. Well, I was
the first one went to decision, so I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about. But
I was about to say, I was real close to betting the house on Garbrandt v. Font doesn't go to decision, and we saw how that ended up, so glad we didn't go there. However, I think it's interesting because if Derek loses, I don't think Derek's entitled to call for a rematch unless he gets knocked out in 30 seconds or something. He beat him the first time. They're 1-1. It's almost more interesting, I think, in my opinion, to see Derek versus Francis a third time, depending on how the second fight plays out, than Stipe versus Francis a third time.
Yeah. I think it's going to be interesting how that heavyweight works out. I think it's the deepest division in heavyweight it's been in a while. So, you know, it'll be interesting to see with Jones coming in as well. He
Well,
just hired a
especially,
new sports agent this week.
yeah, with Golden Boy, Canelo, his team.
Yeah.
But I don't know, man. I respect Jones for everything he's doing because while everybody kind of paints him out to be a villain here and a greedy bastard, I
Mhm.
think he's really trying to make headway in the sport for other people as well. Not to give John Jones a lot of credit as a human because we don't historically see John Jones do things for other people, but if John Jones gets himself paid, who's to say everybody else isn't going to go chase their bag too?
Yeah. Yeah. It'll be interesting. But I think that's enough for this off week. I think we hit some good points. And
Hold on. We got 5 minutes. We got to run down, do our championship rounds, our 5 minute timer, hit on a couple of last minute points, and then we'll run this bitch home.
all
Are
right.
you ready? I got my timer set. 3, 2, 1, go. Okay, last couple of things I have on the list. Fight announcements. We got Kevin Lee versus Sean Brady at 170 on the McGregor card. What do you think about Kevin Lee moving up a weight class?
I like Kevin Lee. He beat Michael Chiesa. Michael Chiesa moved up to 170. Sean
He
Brady.
fought at 170 before.
Yeah, Sean Brady. I'm not real familiar with him. I have to do some homework on him, but I do like Kevin Lee. I'm not making my decision just yet. I'll come back with some informed information, but Kevin Lee is a killer.
For sure. Thiago Santos versus Johnny Walker is going to headline a card in September on the 25th. What do you think about Thiago Santos?
He needs a win bad, and I could see him just annihilating Johnny Walker into another dimension. But
Johnny Walker's coming off an injury or something. Isn't he a bad knee injury or something like that? If I'm not
yeah, I just think Thiago has too much power, and if he clips Johnny Walker might be out for a long time.
I think
But,
Thiago has too much to lose, like you said too.
yeah, he had 3 in a row would just throw a wrench, especially after competing for a lightweight heavy championship.
Next one, we got Jose Aldo versus Pedro Munoz at 135 in August.
Pedro Munoz, Jose Aldo. Interesting. I think Aldo, he's been on quite the slide, if I do recall correctly.
Yeah.
Looking like a shell of his former self. Pedro Munoz, if I'm correct, has some big names under his belt. He kicks really good, but so does Aldo. But he also hits really hard. I like Pedro Munoz for now.
I was about to say for now, but I'm going to disagree with you. I think this is a fight that's kind of built for Aldo to maybe get a win a la Dominic Cruz versus Casey Kenny, get a good one and not put himself back on track. We're not going to see Aldo fight for the bantamweight title anytime soon, but if he can get a couple of wins, he can stick around a little bit longer and we could savor that taste in our mouths we see when we watch him fight.
All right, next.
Okay, I got a question for you.
I want to ask you a question.
Ask me one.
What do you think about the cringe king trying to obtain his 4th seed? We're talking about Henry Cejudo here.
Oh my God. I hate it, man. Especially because at this point, I have no intentions of trusting Henry Cejudo until I see something that says official announcement or it comes from Dana White's mouth. Henry Cejudo is like the Loki of Twitter. Like, he jokes people out all the time. He's a troll. He's out there sending messages that don't make any sense and have no truth to them. So I'd like to see Cejudo fight again. I still think he's got a couple of fights in his youth. I think he's still got a little while where he could compete at a high level, but I'll believe it when I see it.
Hey, he called Aljamain the paper champ and Golden Globe Actor of the Year. He called
Figueiredo was the Pez dispenser champion.
Yeah, and then he called Alex Volkanovski Crocodile Dundee.
Crocodile Dundee. Hold on. I got to drop 3 bombs on us real quick. One, we talked about her earlier, and I hadn't mentioned this name yet on CKE, Calf Kick Experience, but fuck Misha Tate. she basically came out and said Michael Venom Page doesn't have the stones to go compete in the UFC and he should just stay in his lane. Said he should just stay in his fucking lane. Fuck Misha Tate. Second thing, Dana called Ali trying to get Khabib. GSP versus Khabib at 165. Not officially offered yet, not officially anything, but if Dana called and requested it, it's got to have a little bit of truth to it. Lastly, RIP to Paul Felder. He's not dead. He's just retired, and we wish the Irish Dragon well, but
One of my favorite fighters.
let me hit you with the final 30 seconds of the fight. We're going down. You're losing. Throw me a haymaker. If you could see one fight by the end of 2021, doesn't have to make sense, couldn't probably be made, what would you want to see?
I'm gonna have to go Francis versus John Jones. I want to see John Jones. I think a lot of people want to see John Jones. Get John Jones in the octagon as soon as possible.
I'm going to ride the same train, get John Jones in the fucking octagon, and I know it's not realistic, but John Jones versus Izzy would just make me such a happy fan of mixed martial arts. And
I completely forgot about that, but that would be sick.
Time. And we have run our 5th round, our final 5-minute countdown, hit on everything we could this week, that there's no mixed martial arts coming up. One FC coming at you Friday night, tomorrow night. Y'all catch that at 7:30 a.m. Central Time if you're awake. But I'm Zach Gleason. That's Gage Hamby, and this is another episode of the Calf Kick Experience. Signing out.
Later.